when companies try to do super complicated things with AI, whether it's in their product or just operationally, that's when they start hitting problems. They're trying to reach too far. They're trying to do something too aspirational.
Right.
My view is do stuff that's obvious and simple and just stack bricks, adding more and more small use cases. Eventually you'll get to the point where you're going to start to see the needle move on that. And then also you'll build the muscle to do the bigger use cases, the higher leverage stuff. But it takes time to get to that point. I think companies too often just race ahead, try to do the big enchilada, and it doesn't work for them.
Welcome to the Cybersecurity Cafe. This is Rafi Jemgochin. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to have a great conversation with Bobby Tahir. I'm going to invite him in shortly, and we're looking forward to it.
Hey, Rafi, how are you?
Hi, Bobby. How are you?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on the show.
Of course. Thank you for coming. Appreciate your time. Bobby, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I've been a CTO for the last 17 or so years. Started off my career as an engineer developer, and spent most of my time in a few different verticals, healthcare, ed tech, sort of those kinds of things, and then eventually moved into private equity for the last 5 years. Just really immersed in the AI world as every other CTO in the world is right now. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
And are you still working with PE portfolio companies primarily, or are you working for the PE firm itself?
Yeah, I worked with the PE firm and with a lot of portcos and also do a lot of things in the startup world. So yeah, just a mixture of different work.
Awesome. Kind of take us, I was reading some about the content you've put out on LinkedIn and as well as your own newsletter. Tell us a little about what's kind of, what are you thinking about in terms of AI? Where are we today? Where are we going? And where do we have to kind of is there a place that we need to pass in order for this to be a useful solution for businesses?
Yeah. I'm curious to also hear your thought on it, especially because your background is on the security side a lot. But speaking from a CTO perspective, I think the jury's out right now as far as our enterprise organizations getting a big productivity uptick from AI. Some companies do a great job at it, and they really measure the before and the after really well. And they implement their AI really well, like they find the right use cases. And so they see some benefits from it. But there's a lot of organizations right now, I find, that just struggle with AI adoption. And it's not necessarily the fault of the technology. These organizations maybe don't pick the right use cases, or maybe their change management isn't that good, like the cultural people side of things when it comes to AI. The technology is certainly advancing a hand over fist. I mean, it's incredible where we've gotten to at this point, but adoption is lagging in my view. Effective adoption is lagging in my view. And part of it, you see it depends on the size of the organization. The startups that I work with, they're racing at 100 miles an hour, building AI native marketing teams and AI native HR teams and AI native everything. It's the medium and larger companies, SMB and above, that just have a tough time with it. It's funny because like a lot of the leadership will use it, a lot of individual contributors will use it, but not in like a systemic way where you have sustained measurable improvements on top line, bottom line. That level of impact I haven't seen enough of. It's like 5 to 10% of companies.
So are you seeing more tactical use today rather than kind of like a strategic?
Yeah, really tactical. Exactly. You said it perfectly. Super in the weeds. There'll be, developers using it obviously with Copilot, and that's all great. But I always say this, like if you're, let's say product and engineering, let's just take one department, right? If you're building twice as fast If you're building product or IP twice as fast because of AI, is that actually good? Well, it's good if the products that you're building actually make a difference in terms of ARR or customer stickiness or some other key business metric. But like speed itself is not the goal. It's speed for some purpose, you know? And so I think that's where a lot of companies struggle. And it could be sales, you know? I talked to a lot of CROs, startup CROs, SMB CROs who, you know, excitedly tell me, Bobby, we've adopted AI. Oh my God, it does A, B, C, D in the sales team and stuff. Yeah, but are you closing more deals because of it? You know, we always need to bring these technologies back to what the business outcomes are. And it was the same thing with blockchain. I remember in 2018, 19, I did this big webinar thing, not webinar, a conference about blockchain. And everybody is so excited. They're going to implement it in their company. Yeah, but what was it going to what was it going to accomplish for the business? I think we're in that same situation with AI to some degree.
So where are finding real value in their adoption of AI? Are there certain areas that
Yeah.
that you're seeing a kind of repeat, or is it very company specific?
You know, I think companies that focus on the obvious low hanging fruit are the ones that are really winning right now with AI. So, for example, you know, obviously AI can handle things today that like a normal customer support team would typically handle. And you've got tickets coming in, maybe you're a SaaS business and you've got, you know, 150 people on your support team just dealing with tickets. Okay, now AI can obviously efficientize that dramatically. Okay, so that's an example. Another use case that I see a lot of companies doing is adding onboarding features that are AI based to their product. So maybe before onboarding used to take 3 months on their product. Now it's taking like 3 days because the AI is interactively working with the end user to set up the product for them or something. Another example is when companies have like when you have a tech enabled service company and the services team has 50 different human workflows. If you choose wisely, you can find 5, 6, 7 workflows that are easily automatable with AI. Maybe it's like calling a customer back on the third week of the month or so, whatever their workflows are. You can really get a lot of benefits if you think super carefully about the low hanging fruit. I think that when companies try to do super complicated things with AI, whether it's in their product or just operationally, that's when they start hitting problems. You know, they're trying to reach too far.
Mm.
They're trying to do something too aspirational. My view is do stuff that's obvious and simple and just stack bricks. Okay. Just keep adding more and more small use cases. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you're going to start to see the needle move on that. And then also, you'll build the muscle to do the bigger use cases, the higher leverage stuff, you know, but it takes time to get to that point. I think companies too often just race ahead, try to do the big enchilada, and it doesn't work for them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually been my experience as well, is where folks who went all full hog into it, their expectation almost that it's magic, that it's going to do all the things,
Yeah.
rather than really focusing on breaking it down. Like just do one piece of this. You know,
Right.
let's use AI for one piece of this, and then add and stack and stack, and then together, now you probably have the original thing where you had, or maybe not, maybe something that's actually a little bit more sustainable. Because ultimately, I think you actually wrote in one of your articles about how unreliable it is in terms of what the outputs are going to be. And so if you can't rely on the output to be predictable in the sense that that's going to be a quality product or quality solution, how do you devise a system that actually can. We work with financial companies. So when financial companies, they need to put out their NAV or they need to put out some sort of data package, it's got to be accurate, right? So
That's right.
not having accuracy doesn't.
Doesn't help it. Yeah. So there are technological challenges for sure. No question about it. I mean, just along those lines, you know this that I write a newsletter called Technocratic, and it was like it's either Saturday or Friday, one of the last few days, where I literally just wanted ChatGPT to maintain a to-do list for me. I was writing a bunch of articles, I was doing a bunch of research, and I just wanted it to track my to-do list for the day. Well, guess what? Halfway through the day, it forgot like 3 or 4 key items on the to-do list. Now I'm like, okay, this is a very basic task. And I'm not going to, even though I love the idea of LLMs and I'm a tech guy at heart, of course, I'm a tech person, my whole career, all of that. The technology is amazing, but if you cannot track a to-do list, how's this going to work for scaled up enterprise use
Right.
cases?
Right.
Well, the only way they can work is if you put a whole bunch of guardrails and scaffolding around it to basically contain it. But then at that point, maybe you should just do it yourself, in legacy way, in like traditional non-LLM ways. So I'm not saying that technology is not going to evolve. Obviously, it's getting better all the time, but like companies need to be really careful, whether it's like finance, or healthcare, for example. Healthcare is a big area. Like, okay, you better get that right in a healthcare environment, whatever your use case is, because just optically being in a healthcare company, everything you do is under much more scrutiny because it's such a highly regulated kind of industry. So, obviously, if you're doing some consumer stuff where you're making the next Instagram, accuracy doesn't matter as much from the AI, maybe, but any other enterprise use case, you have to be very careful with AI. And look, maybe part of it was my fault, user error. Like I should have been 3 times more explicit or something on my to-do list for the day for technocratic, but that's really, then you're getting into the realm of like, all right, I'll just like maintain this use case manually or with like a to-do list app that's a more traditional one, and I won't use ChatGPT anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there's where we draw the distinction between something that we can provide an agent or something that's very specific like that versus or does that really make sense? I think where one area that we're experimenting is because of the costs associated with AI. We're seeing it with one of our clients where they're all in. They have all they're a very sciencey related investment company. And so they're dealing with a lot of technical documentation. And we see it in the hands of, let's say, smart people in the company. It does really well. Where you put it in front of somebody that is maybe less capable and they're overrunning their costs. They're using credits left and right.
Right.
And it's because they're not. It's one thing if you have the expertise. It's another thing if you're expecting the system to have the expertise to return to you. I think in somebody who has some experience with a system like that, especially around ideation, especially around analysis, financial analysis, things like that, I think it does better. But you put it in front of a novice, I think that's where the wheels fall off a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, people are getting better at using AI tools for sure, but this, you've been in the tech industry for decades. You know, change is hard for companies. And you got an HR person maybe who's been writing job descriptions the same way for 30 years. Now all of a sudden AI comes, okay, changing things up. Maybe they like it, maybe they don't. That no matter how good the technology is, it just takes time. And I think that's where a lot of companies fall short is they don't want to spend any money on change management. Like there's no line item in some budget that's like change management. Okay, there should be if you want to do it at scale. If you're $100 million mid-market company or even 50 million, you better have a line somewhere that says how much money are you going to spend on change management. And companies that are good at AI transformation, they have that line in the budget and they have a playbook for it and they're following it through. That's the truth, because you're not going to get your whole HR team, for example, to hyper efficientize by just saying, here's some licenses to Claude, figure it out. Yeah, they can figure some things out, but you've got to have, my belief is you've got to have a playbook for it. You have to be pretty prescriptive to really get the bigger results and outcomes that you want.
One of the theses now with especially code generating AIs, very much so with Codex and Claude Code coming about, that the era of certain kinds of software systems is kind of going away. That companies are going to be building a lot of this stuff in-house, internally, bespoke, made for them, rather than necessarily buying off the shelf bode kind of an end of certain kinds of SaaS vendors. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every other article these days is about the SaaS apocalypse or whatever. I don't know how true it is. Here's my perspective. Like, complex software isn't just complex because, gosh, the code underneath it is really intricate or something. It's complex because the human workflows, not the human workflows, just the workflows that humans have to follow related to certain use cases, that is complex. And I don't think some kid sitting in his mom's basement using Claude just to create the next Salesforce is going to be all that good at it. Okay. So then you think, okay, well, what about the customers of Salesforce? They're just going to build their own Salesforce. Okay. That's an example. Yeah, I think lots of clients of Salesforce might try that, but I don't think they're going to be very good at it. I don't think because Salesforce, as an example, they've thought through CRM better than every other person in the world. Okay. They're the masters of CRM. Now, some random company in New York or DC where you and I are at, like, are they going to be good at thinking through the workflows of CRM? CRM is still CRM. They're going to make a shitty, pardon my French, you can edit this out. They're going to make a bad version of it. Now, I think where the SaaS apocalypse could happen is if AI technology advances so far along that the AI itself can say, hey, I know everything about CRM, and here's a perfect CRM solution for you. Do you want it? Yes, I want it. It makes it for you, and you don't have to think twice ever again. I don't think we're there yet, of course. Okay. But if that becomes a thing, okay, then yes, you could basically get your CRM from Claude or OpenAI or whatever, Gemini or something. But these workflows in different industries, they're so complicated that it's not as easy as people think. And that's not even factoring in the legal and regulatory aspects of it. As a CTO, am I going to trust a CRM that some person in my sales team just built out of Claude? Hell no, I'm not going to trust that in any way, shape, or form from a security perspective. So I think ultimately the answer to the question is, I think SaaS apocalypse is blown out of proportion, but it could happen after a number of years and advancements in AI. Not now, not this year, not next year, but over time, yes, possibly.
Yeah, I think I think there's certain pockets of industries which probably should be concerned about their product and not necessarily be something that is viable in the future versus something like you said, where a Salesforce, which is I would think more of a platform, and that complexity kind of allows for it to have a little bit of different kind of stickiness. But that said, maybe there is a company that's like, I don't need the complexity of Salesforce. I just need it
Right.
to do these things. And
Yeah,
it's
these like
fairly
three
straightforward. I
things.
know my
Yeah.
business. I don't have to change my processes to conform to the product. I can
Right.
build a product around it.
Yeah. Well, for sure, like that's a really good point. Here, I read this somewhere. Some guy was talking about how the era of easy SaaS is gone.
Mm,
Meaning, like, if you're producing a SaaS tool that doesn't really have a data moat, it doesn't have a workflow moat, there's nothing special or that unique about it, then yeah, you're going to probably end up being disrupted by a product that your own client makes and just does it perfectly for their context and end of story.
yeah.
But then that's just really AI forcing better products to happen.
Yeah.
So I
Agree.
think companies will adapt. They'll figure out like, all right, well, we don't have a moat right now. How do we get a moat? What should our moat be? What unique things can we add into this product and stuff? So if there's like a drop off, yeah, 20 to 30% of all SaaS products will disappear because they're too simplistic and crappy today. They're not really valuable today. So yeah, those will be gone. No question about that. But I think you're not going to disrupt some of the bigger players. The other reason is Salesforce itself is using AI, all right, for the next to building the next generation of Salesforce. As an example, Workday is doing the same thing. All these large enterprise companies are. So they have the control because they can spend money, they can afford to buy tokens. If you have some $50 million company that's trying to build their own, let's say CRM again, are they going to actually spend the money to do it? Because I've seen the token costs, okay, on developer burn
Yeah.
and token burn, and it is very expensive. It is not cheap to use AI to build stuff anymore. And I don't fully buy that the price is like going to keep coming down and down and down. Yes, of course, over tens of years and stuff, but right now it's like sky high. You've got your Claude licensing fee for every developer. Then after that, you've got your token your token, bucket. That might be 4 times the cost of the licensing fee. So are these companies all going to spend that much money? You're going to burn through a lot of cash, and you might just say, you know what, I'm going to leave it up to Salesforce and let them figure it all out for me.
Right.
Like before, like always.
So how has it been in your experience? How has it changed for internally with software teams, operations teams, etc.? Like you wrote something about the transformation about the operations model around software internally at companies.
Yeah, great question. I think there's a spectrum of change. I sort of bucket it, and there's like the normal bell curve of like there's some groups, some companies that aren't doing anything significant with changing how product and engineering works because of AI. Usually it's because the CTO doesn't believe in it, to be honest with you. So they're not forcing or mandating their developers to do anything with it. Then there's the other extreme where companies, especially startups I work with right now, everything is AI native, AI first. So like somebody will think of a new feature idea, and like 10 minutes later, they'll have the requirements written up for that new feature idea using AI. Like the feedback cycle, or I should say the SDLC, is just becoming so compressed. You're moving from one step to the next so fast in these newer AI native companies. It's insane. There's one company that I know that, I kid you not, Rafi, is probably going 3 times faster than I've seen any dev team ever go, because it's all just AI native engineering and product management work. And then there's the part of the bell curve that is the large center of it. And that's where companies bought Copilot and they gave the licenses to all their developers. They even went a step further where they said something like, hey, 10% of your PRs or something have to have some AI generated code in it. But that's like, to me, been a mixed bag. Those companies don't seem to really, I think, the vast majority of companies, I don't think, are getting the kinds of efficiency and productivity gains out of product engineering that they thought that they would. A lot of people thought last year that they were going to bring in Copilot and it'll double velocity and the roadmap would double too. But guess what? Maybe you can even get double the velocity on engineering. That when that feature hits product management and you have no AI in product management, which a lot of companies aren't doing enough there, but the feature gets to product management and now you've got to do UAT testing on it, but you're not using AI for that. And you've got to show it to your customers. You're not using AI for that. And the 15 different steps in product that are happening that aren't AI, then what it's creating is that your roadmap isn't going any faster than it was before. It's just that your engineers are like now going way faster, but the total amount of intellectual property IP that you're putting into the market is exactly the same because you haven't implemented AI in product management or in customer enablement or in any of the other steps of the process. So companies have taken such a scattershot approach that they're not seeing the real results at the business level yet,
Is that just because we're too immature in this model so far, or is it that they're just not really thinking it?
I think the good companies are being very prescriptive and they're thinking through their SDLC very carefully. And they're sitting there saying, how does a feature make its way throughout the entire process, all the way through into the hands of the customer's using it, giving us feedback. If they think of implementing AI and all of those steps in the right way, then they usually get some kind of serious results. But if they only partially implement it or they misunderstand their own SDLC, then they're kind of they're in a pickle because the bottlenecks just aren't being fully looked at. So, the good CTOs out there in the world and the good chief product officers in the world, they're really sitting down and taking the time to document how they build software and then rethinking it in the world of AI, as opposed to just being like, hey guys, just start using a Copilot. Let's see what happens. We'll figure it out as we go. Okay, you're going to be figuring it out, quote unquote, for like 3 years, and all your competition is just going to crush you because they're just going to do it in a better way. So yeah, it's difficult for some companies to sort of wrap their head around it.
You read you wrote an article about AI's bright future last month. So let's talk maybe on the positive side. What was your thesis there? What are you thinking towards?
Yeah, I think from a technological innovation standpoint, it's quite amazing what day-to-day use of LLM is today versus 2 years ago or 3 years ago when this hype train first started. We've both been around the block. We've seen cloud, we've seen social media, we've seen blockchain, and I don't think that any of those compares to how massive AI is already at this point in the process. And so I think that from an engineering standpoint, the sky truly is the limit. There's so much investment dollars going into AI and so many super creative companies that are doing AI really, really well. There's a number of for example, recently, there's a number of different voice AI companies that I've seen come out with some solutions that are just astounding. The way they're able to understand the customer talking to the AI, the way they're able to answer the customer's problem as one example is just amazing. It's better than anything I've ever seen before. In the healthcare space, AI is going bonkers. I mean, in terms of product innovation, there's so many use cases in healthcare that I've seen in the last just 6 months that it's better than anything else. Like you compare like old OCR, like optical character recognition happens a lot in healthcare
Mhm.
from 5 years ago compared to today with AI's help. It's like night and day levels of accuracy and efficiency and that kind of thing. You look at the legal tech space, there's so many applications for this kind of technology that smart companies and smart people, when they really niched it down and focused the technology, they've been able to do some pretty amazing things. So, my suggestion to all CTOs is bring it into your company, but also it's good to spend a lot of time learning the innards of the technology. Okay. Maybe not at like a transformation paper level innards, but definitely all the stuff that surrounds LLM, Pinecone, how RAG works, vector databases, brush up on Python again. Now, that is such a hot and innovative world that you can get so many ideas from how people are building things and bring those same concepts and ideas into your own product lines. So it's never been funner to be a CTO. I don't know about CISOs because security is a big problem right now with AI, but I know you've been a CISO for years and now you're a CEO, but this is the funnest the software industry's ever been for years. I mean, cloud was interesting, blockchain was technically really cool, but this is just like another level of exciting times for anybody who's a technologist. They should all be diving into learning about LLMs and how it's changing machine learning and data science. I mean, every product, every application almost you can think of can now have some element of AI into it. So you got to be AI first in your thinking and the way you kind of innovate as an engineer now. You can't ignore it. Although some
Yeah.
companies do, but you
Yeah.
probably shouldn't.
Yeah. We have I'm in a part of an NGO here in New York, and we put on a mentoring event every year with various different industries. So I'm involved in the technology, engineering, science side. And this past year, we had, out of all the potential mentees about 5 to 10 just in data sciences, which like 2 years ago, there would have been one maybe.
Right.
So we're actually seeing young people getting interested in this field too, which for me, this part of it makes it interesting and exciting because I
Right.
think that's where there's some potential really big bang benefits to how AI works. Like I know in our daily work, how I use it, sure, just like the same things that you said before, really tactical sales, marketing, content, but even, software development. I've gotten back into coding kind of, even though I came from that background and now I'm able to do some things for
Yeah.
myself as we do, security assessments. We can do things that are really in a rapid pace. We shorten the cycle of doing testing against people's applications much easier now with the AI. What I go one of the kind of my thesis was, I don't know if it's panned out yet, but this is from like the last couple of years since kind of ChatGPT broke into the mainstream market, is that the as companies start to reduce entry staff because the AI can become more capable from that really beginning level, we lose the potential of building the next generation of people because they didn't have a chance to build out that initial learning capacity because we didn't give them that opportunity anymore. So
Yeah.
what happens down the road with our workforce? Hopefully they adopt such that they become the users of these tools rather than necessarily being displaced by those tools. What do you think about that?
Yeah. You know, one thing I kept thinking about since I first started using um LLMs, I think it was at the end of 2023, is computer science debt, you know, in universities, colleges, what have you, is CS just gone? And sometimes I think about like how I grew up in the 80s, and in that decade people used to talk about how robots in factories would eliminate every factory job ever. Robotics was a big deal in the 80s. Now, again, it's a big deal and stuff because of AI. But you probably remember this. The Japanese robots were going to
Mhm.
take over
That's right.
every factory in the world.
That's right.
That didn't exactly happen. And in the same way, probably CS, computer science, and associated studies, they're not going to go away or something totally. But there is a sea change happening with respect to how quickly any random person can start building software. In fact, I had a discussion with my brother the other day, and he is not a tech person in any way, shape, or form. And he was like, "Bobby, I built 2 apps." Okay. And I'm like, "Wow, that's cool. What did they do?" And he gave me a couple examples of apps that are like pretty involved and really pretty interesting and I think useful to a lot of people. He's just building it in Claude. So I think that probably computer science does become more fringe every year, and maybe it's 0.5% more fringe every year only, but that's happening because it's just another abstraction layer, right? We started with zeros and ones assembly, and then it was C, C++, Java came around, then revolutions in like things like GitHub and then version control to let teams work together better. And now AI, another abstraction layer. You don't have to think as much about deeper problems. It does everything for you, scaffolding and whatnot, and that's gonna continue, I think, to be more and more the norm. Now I do think that there's use cases obviously where AI code generation is not going to be relied upon for many years to come. Would you use AI to do all your trades if the volume was in the billions? Maybe they are already doing it in the investment banks, but my point is just that we have to face reality that this new abstraction layer of AI is very powerful, and computer science may be on the downswing as we thought of it before, and maybe some new kind of science related to AI can be a thing now. How you use AI, how you work alongside it, how it works, that might become a new field of study, for people who used to do computer science before. So anyway, yeah, that's a little bit of my thought on it.
So I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about security as a CTO. Kind of what has been where are you thinking about in terms of the guardrails around AI or the risks associated with AI, whether that's with your PE firms or with your portcos?
Well, whether you're a small startup or you're a large enterprise organization, AI represents definitely another threat vector in terms of security. And I don't think a lot of companies care about it yet. I do think one of these days we're going to have there was a CrowdStrike outage from last year and a couple of other pretty well-known outages last year, security outages, where the root cause had something to do with AI, but it was kind of buried. And now I think what'll happen in the next year or two, there'll be some massive breach, maybe at a bank or at some industry like that, and it'll be directly because of AI. AI will be in the headlines, and then that'll get companies to invest more on the security side of AI. Right now, I think companies do a lot of lip service to it, but they're so enamored by the upside that they just are putting security as a 15th level priority. Now, being a CTO, security was always really important to me. And I always had this mantra of uptime first, security, and then everything else. And that meant the product roadmap wasn't as important as security. But now everything is flipped. And
Is that unusual, do you think? Were you unusual there?
I don't think a lot of companies allocate budget towards security like they should. We all know that. I just simply think it's much worse now. AI represents a very dangerous situation. I mean, companies are dumping in healthcare data into all kinds of open source and proprietary LLMs without knowing any of the consequences of how that data is going to be used. Nobody cares because they're trying to get the upside. They're trying to get the ROI. They think there's going to be something waiting on the other end of the rainbow for them and stuff. So maybe security used to be like fifth most important in a CTO's bucket list or a budget, but now it's like 50th because the promise of AI is just the dominating mindset. So nobody cares about security right now. They're all just into what's the next cool feature we're going to put out and stuff like that. I don't know, for whatever weird reason, but like a lot of my friends are CISOs and they're running scared. They're just like, this is a really scary time to be a CISO because anything bad could happen. But look, you're the expert on it. What are you seeing out there?
I mean, just at a baseline level, let's take it for what it is. Claude Code example is we're basically giving a polymorphic virus to each employee to use across the day.
Well, that's a
Because
perfect way of saying
we give it a task to do,
Yeah.
and let's say you put up barriers around certain things. You can't access this data. You can't. It tries to get around it. It
Right.
works its way around the problem because it wants to solve it for the end user. So it becomes very, very, very tricky to manage that control. That's like a simple structured problem. We're running into this difficulty with application allow listing. Application allow listing is based on saying that you're only allowed to run the programs that are on this list, right? These are the programs that you can run. And those are typically based on a mathematical formula to create a hash, right? That's going to be specific for that company, for that program. But that changes constantly when you're doing rapid code development. And so you're essentially, and when you had isolation around a software development team, you can say, all right, you can expand allowing this group to do a little bit more around there, but you've essentially now given that to the entire company. And so those are all the kind of the things that we're running into. And then of course there's the shadow usage. The people are using kind of all sorts of things, whether it's DeepSeek or Kimi or whatever. We're seeing it all.
Yeah.
Once we start putting up visibility guidelines, we start with visibility, just like most things. We try to say what is being used. We identify what are those things. Like, do you really, just like people used to try to use their own personal Gmail account to send the files home, it's the same
Yeah,
idea, except now they're, instead of sending files home, they're sending it to this black box in China that can do all
right,
sorts of funny stuff with it. So
right.
there's a lot of, besides the education aspect of it, um, the, the tooling right now is just not there
Yeah,
around a lot of the guardrails. It's being built. It's being built largely in the enterprise. We're seeing some companies play around with it in the small and medium business. That's where we live. So I'm hopeful that some of that stuff will happen, and not before we have that major incident that you said. But I think that major incident needs to take place before people take it seriously,
yeah, you're
unfortunately.
right. Yeah, and then people will start catching up. I mean, we always start in this transformation process being security being a little bit like behind, but that's just kind of the nature of any transformation. And then,
Exactly.
people start investing more and stuff. But one of the cool things, like in my group of security sort of friends, CISO friends, is that they're ready for it in a lot of ways. So when the budgets come,
Yeah.
they'll be ready to
They'll know
roll.
what to
It's not
do.
like they're sleeping on it. They really care about this stuff a lot, and it's exactly like you said. These kinds of threats related to AI and that kind of thing are very obvious to security people. So it's not some kind of mystery box. We know what's happening,
Yeah.
but we just need the budgets to
Yeah.
go and start taking care of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So
Well, Bobby, I thank you for spending so much time with us. I really appreciate it. You
yeah,
have a
absolutely.
podcast, you have a newsletter. Please plug away.
Yeah, yeah. For anybody who's a CTO or a chief product officer or a CISO who wants to know more about AI adoption or just talk technology in general, go to www.technocratic.io. There's a newsletter, there's a podcast. So check it out. A lot of great guests and a lot of really interesting AI adoption topics. Rafi, I want to thank you. This was really fun talking to you. I want to have you on my podcast one of these days where
Love that.
all we'll do is talk about security and AI. And that'll
Sounds
be
good.
tons of fun one
Sounds
of these
great.
days.
Appreciate
Awesome.
that. Thank you so much for your time, Bobby. All the best to you.
Likewise. Thanks, Rafi.